The night Lyra Ashworth was cast out of the Blackthorn pack, the sky was clear and cold, and the moon watched without mercy. She stood in the center of the pack grounds, surrounded by wolves who had once called her family, and she did not cry. She had promised herself she would not give them that. Her crime was simple, at least to her. She had refused to bond with Marcus, the pack's beta, a man twice her age who spoke to her like she was property rather than a person. Her father had arranged the match to strengthen his position among the elders, and when Lyra said no in front of the entire pack, the humiliation fell not on her father, but on Marcus, and on the pack itself. Alpha King Damian Blackthorn stood at the front of the crowd that night. He was young for an alpha, only 23, but already hardened by years of leading a pack that expected strength above all else. Lyra had known him since childhood. They had trained together, laughed together, and once, in a quiet moment neither of them spoke of again, she had thought there was something more between them. But when the elders called for her exile, Damian said nothing. He watched as they stripped the pack mark from her skin, a burning brand that left her without protection, without a wolf pack, without a home. He watched as 2 guards dragged her to the edge of the territory and pushed her into the dark forest beyond the border. She looked back once. Damian's eyes met hers. He did not move. He did not speak. That silence was the last thing she remembered before she turned and walked into the trees, alone. The forest was unforgiving that winter. Lyra had no pack to share warmth with, no hunting party to bring her food, no healer to tend her wounds when she fell and cut her leg on a jagged rock. She was 17 and completely alone, and every survival instinct told her she would not live to see spring. She wandered for days, growing weaker, until she stumbled into a part of the woods the packs called the Ashen Woods. Even rogue wolves avoided this place. Old stories said it was cursed, that wolves who entered never came back the same, if they came back at all. Lyra was too exhausted and too desperate to care about old stories. She collapsed at the base of a circle of ancient stones, moss-covered and half-buried in the earth, and she did not expect to open her eyes again. But she did. When she woke, the pain in her body was gone. The cut on her leg had healed into a thin white scar. She felt something new inside her, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with fever. She sat up and looked at the stones surrounding her, and for reasons she could not explain, she understood, without being told, that they had chosen her. The Ashen Woods were not cursed. They were the last resting place of the first wolves, an ancient bloodline that had existed long before the modern packs, long before alpha kings and pack marks and territory wars. The first wolves were said to be stronger, wiser, and far more powerful than any wolf alive, but their bloodline had been thought extinct for 1,000 years. Lyra did not know why the stones recognized her. She did not know if it was fate, or luck, or something written into her blood long before she was born. All she knew was that something inside her had changed, and it kept changing every day she stayed near that circle. She built a small shelter nearby and stayed through the winter. Her strength returned faster than it should have. Her senses sharpened beyond anything she had known, even at the height of her training in the Blackthorn pack. When spring came, she shifted into her wolf form for the first time since her exile, and the wolf that emerged was larger, darker, and more powerful than she had ever imagined possible. Word spread slowly among rogue wolves, but it spreads. Over the following months, other exiles and outcasts began to find their way toward the Ashen Woods, drawn by rumors of a woman who lived there, a woman who had somehow survived what no rogue was meant to survive. Lyra did not turn them away. She remembered too well what it felt like to be alone, hungry, and forgotten by everyone who once claimed to love her. She taught them what she was learning about her own abilities, and in turn, they taught her how to lead. Slowly, without ever meaning to build a pack, Lyra found herself surrounded by one anyway. Unlike the Blackthorn pack, this one was built on something different. No one here was cast aside for saying no. No one here was judged by whose child they were or who they refused to marry. They were simply wolves who had been broken by the old world and were learning to become whole again. 5 years passed this way. Lyra grew from a frightened, exiled girl into a leader whose name rogue wolves whispered with respect, and whose name the old packs whispered with fear, though none of them truly knew what she had become. She rarely thought of the Blackthorn pack. She rarely let herself think of Damien at all, though some nights, when the fire burned low and her new pack slept around her, she remembered the way he had looked at her before she disappeared into the trees, and the silence that followed. While Lyra built her new life in the shadows of the ashen woods, the Blackthorn pack was falling apart. Damien had spent 5 years trying to be the alpha king his father raised him to be, strong, unshakable, and always in control. But strength without wisdom is fragile, and Damien had learned this the hard way. A war with a rival coalition of packs had drained his territory of warriors and resources. His council, once loyal, had grown restless, some of them openly questioning whether he was fit to lead. Whispers of replacing him grew louder each season, and Damien, though he would never admit it aloud, felt the weight of failure pressing harder on him every day. He often thought of Lyra during those years, though he told no one. He thought of the night he let her be exiled, and how easily he could have stopped it if he had simply spoken up. He told himself at the time that questioning the elders would have cost him his authority, that a young alpha could not afford to appear weak in front of his pack. But 5 years of silence had taught him that some kinds of weakness cannot be hidden behind strength. Some choices follow a person forever, no matter how much power they hold. By the time the rival coalition launched their final assault on Blackthorn territory, Damien's forces were outnumbered and exhausted. Warriors who had once sworn loyalty to him now spoke of surrender. His own beta, Marcus, the very man Lyra had once refused to marry, suggested quietly that perhaps it was time for new leadership. Damien stood at the edge of his weakening territory one evening, watching the horizon for signs of the enemy, and for the first time in his life, he did not know if he could protect what remained of his pack. That was the night Lyra returned. She walked into Blackthorn territory without an escort of warriors, without weapons drawn, without any sign of aggression at all. Yet the wolves who had once known her as a frightened, exiled girl now felt something entirely different radiating from her presence, something ancient and undeniable. Behind her walked a small group of wolves the Blackthorn pack did not recognize, wolves who carried themselves with quiet confidence rather than fear. Damien did not recognize her at first. 5 years had changed her in ways that went beyond appearance. But when she spoke his name, calm and steady, something in her voice pulled him straight back to the night he failed her. "Damien," she said, "we need to talk." He stared at her for a long moment, searching her face for the girl he remembered, and found instead a woman who no longer needed anyone's permission to stand where she stood. She was not there for revenge, though he braced himself for it. She explained, in the same calm voice, that a growing group of hunters had discovered the existence of first wolves, and that they were tracking anyone connected to that ancient bloodline. Several rogue wolves in her care had already been attacked. Worse, the hunters had begun targeting packs that unknowingly harbored descendants of the first wolves within their bloodlines, packs like Blackthorn, whose founding history stretched back further than most modern wolves remembered. Lyra had not come to save Damien. She had come because innocent wolves, some of them still loyal to the very pack that exiled her, were now in danger, and she refused to let that happen if she had the power to stop it. Damien listened, and for the first time in years, he felt something other than the exhaustion of leadership. He felt hope, though he was almost ashamed to admit it, because the person offering that hope was the same person he had once let the world discard. Over the following days, Lyra worked alongside the Blackthorn pack to prepare for the hunters' arrival. Her presence unsettled many of the elders, some of whom remembered the night they cast her out and could not meet her eyes. Marcus, in particular, avoided her entirely, aware that his own bitterness had played a part in the decision that led to her exile. Damien tried, more than once, to speak with her privately, to apologize for his silence all those years ago. Each time, Lyra listened politely, but her answers were measured and distant, the answers of someone who had long since stopped needing his approval to feel whole. She was not cruel to him, she simply no longer orbited around his feelings the way she once had. "I forgive you," she told him one evening, when he finally worked up the courage to ask directly. "But forgiveness does not mean I forgot what silence costs. You didn't just fail me that night. You failed to be the kind of leader who protects the people who trust him, even when it's difficult." Damien had no answer for that. He only nodded, understanding, perhaps for the first time, the full weight of what his silence had done. When the hunters finally attacked, they came at night, moving through the forest with weapons designed specifically to counter werewolf strength and speed. The Blackthorn warriors fought bravely, but they were unprepared for tactics built to exploit their weaknesses. It was Lyra and her small group of ashen wolves who turned the tide, using abilities passed down through the first wolf's bloodline, abilities the hunters had never encountered and did not know how to counter. Lyra herself faced the hunters' leader in the heart of the battle, a cold and calculating man who had spent years studying ancient wolf bloodlines in order to destroy them. She did not fight with anger. She fought with the calm, controlled power of someone who had spent 5 years learning exactly who she was and what she was capable of. When the battle ended, the hunters retreated, their leader wounded, and their numbers too thin to continue the assault. The Blackthorn pack survived that night, but everyone present understood clearly that it was not because of their Alpha King. It was because of the woman he once let them destroy. In the days that followed, as the pack began to rebuild, and the elders quietly reconsidered years of decisions made without wisdom, Damien approached Lyra one final time. He offered her everything he had left to offer: his throne, a formal bond, a place at his side as equal ruler of the Blackthorn territory. He meant it sincerely. He had spent 5 years understanding what he lost, and he was prepared to give up anything to have her back in his life. Lyra listened to his offer with the same calm patience she had shown throughout her return. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment, looking at the pack grounds where she had once been marked a rogue and thrown into the dark. "You're offering me a crown," she finally said, "as if that's what I ever wanted. I didn't come back for a throne, Damien. I didn't even come back for you. I came back because people needed help, and I was able to give it." She stepped closer, and for a brief moment, something softer crossed her expression, a flicker of the girl she used to be before the world taught her to stand entirely on her own. "I hope you become the kind of leader who speaks up next time," she said quietly. "Not for me. For whoever else the elders decide to throw away." Then she turned and walked toward the edge of the territory, the same path she had once been forced down in exile, except this time, she walked it by choice, surrounded by wolves who trusted her completely, wolves who had chosen to follow her, not out of fear, but out of respect she had earned entirely on her own. Damien stood at the border of his territory and watched her go, just as he had watched her leave 5 years before. But this time, the silence between them meant something different. It was not the silence of a man refusing to act. It was the silence of a man finally understanding, completely and painfully, exactly what he had lost, and exactly why some things, once given away, can never truly be reclaimed. The Ashen Woods welcomed Lyra home as the sun rose over the horizon, and somewhere behind her, the Alpha King remained standing at the edge of his territory long after she disappeared from sight, watching the empty road, and finally, quietly, learning how to live with the weight of his own silence.